Recently, we were fortunate enough to receive a new information drop on a few things related to the Blood of Dawnwalker. The source of this information is the Polish gaming website GRY Online, and unfortunately, I don't speak Polish. However, we are fortunate in today's day and age that there are some pretty good translation tools out there, such as DeepL, that allow us to pierce the veil of tongues, and thus, I have availed myself of just such a tool. And whilst it may be possible that there are a few mistakes here and there, based on my experience with this particular machine translator, DeepL, with other languages that I do know, it should be largely accurate. And of course, I'll be offering my summary of these things with some of my own interpretations. With that said, let's launch into the most game-relevant parts of the interview. Though the world that Dawnwalker takes place in is a real and parallel Earth to our own, the Vale Sangora, or the Blood Valley, is fictional, tucked away in the Carpathians. And the game appears to be not just a game of Polish influences, but based on a blend of Eastern European elements including Polish, Romanian, Balkan, and Czech elements. There's a broad focus on Slavic features because Rebel Wolves is Polish after all, and although quests in the game are sometimes inspired by Slavic legends, Rebel Wolves is not limiting themselves to a rigid framework or set of cultural rules. The Carpathians fit in nicely with the vampire theme, but they don't wish to be monothematic in their approach, and thus, different mythologies and legends and things that are simply interesting are going to be in the game. It's an Earth set in the Middle Ages, but one of dark fantasy, and even the magic reflects this. So there's magic, for example, that can cause enemies to have an epileptic seizure, and the magic is meant to be down to earth and reflective of real-world diseases in this sense, i.e. reminiscent of a low magic setting in fantasy terms. To the question of whether or not players will explore places outside of the Vale Sangora, Tomaszkiewicz stresses that in a similar vein to the Gothic games of old, Blood of Dawnwalker takes place in a set location, which is integral to the plot of a group of vampires taking over and beginning to rule there, and thus, the focus on the valley and what happens there is very important for story and plot-related elements. However, Tomaszkiewicz stresses that this is just the beginning of the saga of Dawnwalker, and we will be traveling through the eras, implying that in future titles, we'll be exploring other places and perhaps even other time periods or epochs. Tomaszkiewicz is quick to explain that Dawnwalker is not just about vampires. They are but one element in the game. Blood and wine had a lot to do with vampires, he says, but was not the only element of the expansion in Witcher 3. It's not a game about vampires or horror. It's an action RPG in an open world where the most important thing is the story. Cohen is a unique being. He has worked in a silver mine half his life and has contracted silver poisoning as a result. And when he is transformed into a vampire, the lethal combination of silver and sunlight come together to create something new. During the day, his vampiric state reverses, and he is a normal mortal human who can die to normal things such as a crossbow bolt or a blow to the head. But when the sun sets, his vampiric transformation progresses. He is neither vampire nor human, but someone and something unique. And Tomaszkiewicz stresses that this is just the beginning, so there will be a lot more development of the concept in future games. Building upon the idea that the game is not just about vampires, there's already been mention of kobolds, uriash, which are mythological giants inspired by Romanian folklore, and a bunch of legendary creatures that are customized to the vision of Rebel Wolves. And they won't always be monsters or opponents, which could make it interesting. Regarding the vampires, each of them has their own unique abilities, their own history, and specifically, regarding Bakir, the Mongolian-looking vampire, he is quoted as having a very rich history and is very important to the plot. And Tomaszkiewicz is quick to point out that the vampires are not simply evil, rather they are cursed in a sense. They are individuals with their own experiences that have been gathered over the centuries, and they have their own motivations. Now, we already knew this, but in case you didn't know, the CEO has confirmed that if Cohen does not feed in his vampiric form, it can be very risky, and you could potentially miss out on content because, well, you've devoured somebody important or even close to you. And a very important question that has been answered by Tomaszkiewicz is whether or not Cohen can be bad or evil, and the answer to that is yes. You can play Cohen that way if you so choose, which is in keeping with the Blood of Dawnwalker's design being an RPG, allowing Cohen to lean into the dark side of his nature if that's what you want. The structure of the map of the open world is inspired by games such as Fallout 2, where you can effectively go where you want and fight whom you want when you want to. provided you know what to do and where to go. Essentially, what you're doing is basically preparation in your opposition to Brenzis. So you could, in theory, just go in and storm his castle, but you probably wouldn't fare all too well, as you might know where your family's being held, and you could go to them, but your chances of success would be very low since Brenzis and his whole clique of vampires could be there. And everything that Rebel Wolves is putting in the game is meant to aid you in your quest to rescue your family. There are no real distinctions between side and main quests, and you engage with them so as to further your main goal and objective. You can attempt to gain allies, or go it alone if you so choose, and player freedom in this regard is very important, and Tomaszkiewicz describes it as freedom and non-linearity on a scale like never before. Perhaps most important of all is the question of time and how it affects the game. A lot of people are concerned with this, and Tomaszkiewicz explains it well. When you play Dawnwalker, you are hyper-aware of time pushing forward. Part of the UI has a day bar that fills up so you know how a given quest or objective will affect what you're doing. Exploration by itself does not move time forward, but the passage of time is an element that is included because Rebel Wolves wants you to experience emotions in a different way to other games. And he explains it this way, quote, "We read players' comments on previous games we prepared, including memes. There's an important task to do here, but first I will play cards. We took that to heart. We want to emphasize emotions with the passage of time mechanics. If I see a burning house, people suffering, calling for help, and I still go to play cards, even though we don't have such activities, and I come back when I'm comfortable, I will find ruins. Something that will happen to these people as a consequence of my decision, because passivity is also a decision. So this approach brings the game closer to pen and paper RPGs. Our goal is not to exert pressure to complete the game against the clock. We use this resource to achieve a different narrative effect and evoke completely different emotions, and even talk somewhat about gameplay, though not much. According to the CEO, there are 3 trees revolving around your abilities in Blood of Dawnwalker: a human tree, a vampire tree, and a common tree. This will allow people to play Cohen in keeping with their preferences and roleplay him the way they want to, allowing, for example, players who wish to resist the dark side to cultivate the human side more, or alternatively, abandon their humanity altogether if they so choose. Now, some people ask about the possibility of a stealth mechanic in the game, but stealth won't be an inherent part of the mechanics unless it's part of the greater story, and it may be possible that you have allies that will fight by your side if you so choose. You can play as a lone wolf or not, and basically freedom of choice in the game seems to be the main element that Tomaszkiewicz is stressing here, and that's pretty much the article in a nutshell. But in any event, if you like my videos and like my takes, and you want to see more content on Blood of Dawnwalker, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like the video, leave a comment, share the video. It'd be much appreciated as it really helps out the channel, and I'll check you out next time. Until then.